Hey YouTube, how's it going? My name's Dustin Smith and I'm with A2K, Allegiance to the King, and today we got another exciting video for you on responsibly reading the book of Revelation. Hopefully you've been keeping up with our Revelation videos that we've been putting out on our A2K YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/allegiance to the King. Last week we looked at one of the reasons why the book of Revelation was written, and that particular reason that we looked at last week was that the church was being persecuted and the book had to be written to the churches in Asia Minor, those 7 churches in Revelation chapters 2 through 3, and it had to give them comfort in light of the fact that they were being persecuted. We're going to look at another reason why the book of Revelation was written today, and specifically what we're going to see is that many within those churches in Revelation chapters 2 through 3 had compromised with the culture and they had given up their witness of Christ to the world. So instead of those churches being Christ's light to the world, they had been so ingrained and encultured with the fallen Babylon, as it's described in Revelation, and they had forgotten their responsibility and their vocation to the world. So we're going to see here that they have been compromised, and we're going to see how Revelation writes to them and tries to rebuke them and remind them of their purpose. Let's look at a couple places that tell us that many of these churches had compromised with the culture. We're going to start in Revelation chapter 2. We're going to look here in chapter 2 and verse 20. This is where Jesus speaks to the church in Thyatira. Notice what he says to this church, Revelation 2:20. But I have this against you, that you tolerate the woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, and she teaches and leads my bondservants astray. To do what? So that they will commit acts of immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols. Okay? So here in this church, they tolerate or they allow this female teacher to teach and to lead Jesus' bondservants astray. And she basically says it is okay to eat meat sacrificed to idols and to commit acts of immorality. Okay? So what we're seeing there is that the church says that this sort of behavior is okay, that they tolerate this behavior. They tolerate a teacher within their church who not only says it's okay to do this, but she herself is doing it as well. Okay, we can see this church clearly has compromised with the culture. Let's look at another passage. This is in Revelation chapter 3 in verse 4, where Jesus speaks to the church in Sardis. He says this, "But you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy." Okay? Notice there, he says there just are few people in Sardis who have not soiled their garments. Okay? And if it's just a few people who haven't soiled their garments, that means that most of the people in that church have soiled their garments. Okay? Now, soiling their garments is a metaphor. It's one of the pictures that Revelation uses to demonstrate that they have compromised their life. They have compromised their reality and their identity with the fallen culture around them. They're no longer clothed with white. They have soiled their garments. It doesn't mean that they have fallen into some mud. It means that their outer manifestation is being demonstrated by soiling, by dirt, and by the disgust of this fallen world. They're not demonstrating the color of light of the good deeds that they're supposed to be demonstrating as Christ's people, as Christ's light to the world. Okay? And so we can see this picture of the world having compromised many of the Christians within the book of Revelation. You can look at many of the churches listed in chapters 2 and 3, and you can see that Jesus rebukes many of them for having compromised with the fallen world around them. And specifically, the fallen world around them is described in Revelation as fallen Babylon, as the Roman world. Okay? And so let's look at the way that fallen Babylon and this Roman world is described. It's described in chapters 17 and 18 as a woman who is a harlot, who is a whore, and she's this terrible, nasty, grotesque woman. And Revelation basically reveals and says, oh, you think that this is something that you can compromise with? You think that Rome is something that's okay? You think it's something that is worthwhile to be involved with as a Christian, Revelation reveals to its readers that no, it's not a beautiful woman. It's this grotesque whore. It's this harlot. It's nasty, and God's judgment is going to fall upon her. But notice what we read in Revelation chapter 18 in verse 4. Notice this voice from heaven. Revelation 18:4 says, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. Okay? Notice that summons there. It says, come out of her. Come out of fallen Babylon. Come out of this Roman culture, my people. So God here is saying, my people, come out of her so that you won't participate in her sins. Okay? Don't compromise with the culture anymore. Don't compromise with fallen Babylon anymore. Come out of her. Now notice this. These 7 churches, they don't actually live in Rome. They live in Asia Minor. There are these various churches, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, all these different churches. They actually don't live in Rome. They live in Asia Minor. So you have to think to yourself, what does it mean for Revelation to say to these churches to come out of her? It doesn't mean to come out of geographical Rome. It means to separate yourself from fallen Babylon. Separate yourself from this culture, this Roman culture that has engrossed those churches, many of those churches within Revelation chapters 2 through 3, and it has allowed them to participate in her sins. And so we see here that if they are to separate from her, if they are to remove themselves from fallen Babylon, then they won't participate in her sins, and of course, they will not receive of her plagues. Notice there the warning that those churches who do not separate from her, who do not come out of this city, are going to receive of her plagues, okay? So, if the churches are not supposed to identify with fallen Babylon, they're not supposed to identify with the fallen Roman system, to whom are they supposed to identify? You know, where are they supposed to link their identity? And we can see this at the very end in chapter 22. In chapters 21 and 22 of Revelation, we see that there's a different woman that is revealed. We see that this woman is the bride of Christ, and the bride of Christ is another way of describing the Christian church in all of her glory. And she is not an ugly, grotesque, whorish woman. No, she is a beautiful bride. She is clothed in white. She is magnificent, okay? She is nothing like that other woman, okay? The other woman describes the tale of one particular city, the city of Rome, but the bride of Christ describes the tale of a new city, New Jerusalem. But look at the summons in chapter 22. I'm going to look here in verse 14. Blessed are those who wash their robes so that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter by the gates into the city, okay? So here there's the blessing that says, if you wash your robes, meaning if you rid yourself of the corruption of fallen Babylon, if you identify with Christ with your good deeds and the outer manifestation describing the clothes that you wear, being a reflection of your inward commitment, loyalty, and faithfulness to Christ, then you have the right, the authority, and the privilege to eat of the tree of life and to enter into the gates of this new city, of the city of New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem, which is described as the bride, and the bride is the church, okay? And then notice here in verse 17, still in that chapter, the Spirit and the bride say, come, and let the one who hears say, come, and let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who wishes take the water of life without cost. So there we see that the final summons in the book is to come, to be a part of this city, to be a part of this church, to be a part of this beautiful bride of Christ. Okay? Earlier we saw that you're supposed to leave the other city. Do not partake of her sins and to receive of her plagues, to get out of fallen Babylon, to remove yourself from this Roman culture. So one of the reasons that the book of Revelation is written, as we've seen, is to remind the church that they cannot compromise with this fallen world around us, okay? They need to identify with the bride of Christ, to identify with the New Jerusalem, and to stop identifying with the fallen Babylon world, and to stop identifying with that grotesque Roman whore, okay? So hopefully this video has encouraged you in your reading of the book of Revelation and in your practical application of this particular book, which is basically saying that we need to be fully identified with Christ, fully identified with the church, the New Jerusalem, and the beautiful bride, and to not compromise with the culture around us, thinking that we can be participants in two cities. Okay? Be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more videos from Allegiance to the King, and look forward to videos on responsibly reading the book of Revelation each and every Friday here on Allegiance to the King. My name is Dustin Smith for A2K, and until next time, take care.